Nachos amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together to share music with each other, an album at a time, like a little book club for music. I'm Petey Rave, and I am here to protest this anti-pojama propaganda. But let me not get ahead of myself. Here with me is my team, my squad, my crew, my quorum. We've got David.
Hi, everybody. My glasses kind of hide it, but I'm growing a tiny bit of a unibrow that I need to clean up just a bit. Hashtag social distancing.
Exactly. We've got Matt.
It's not the pajamas, it's the people who wear them.
This is what I don't approve of. And we've got Brett.
I for a little while shaved down to a mustache, and then I had to make sure that didn't stay on my face long enough to this episode. So, the prop shaving, it works, and sometimes it doesn't. I was a little too Ron Swanson looking.
Yes. You gotta do the mustache.
I'm genuinely surprised you didn't go with the Ron Swanson look.
I mean, my soul patch would be blonde, and my mustache would not be Zappa-esque at all.
Yeah, sure.
It'd be more Ned Flanders-y than that. So,
speaking of mustaches and soul patches, we got an album that we're going to be discussing this week, and it's provided by none other than Matt. Matt, what have you brought the group this week?
I have brought an album by the man with impossible facial hair, possibly artificial, although maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm talking about Frank Zappa and his album One Size Fits All.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is an interesting thing. I know that it's going to be interesting what the expectations were, because I know I had very little, but I'll go to you guys. David, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I would say, Petey Rave, that my knowledge of Frank Zappa is probably bare bones basic. Shake Your Booty, My Guitar Wants to Kill Your Mama, and actually one song on this album, Inca Road, was pretty much the extent of my knowledge of the man's work himself. I am a fan of a few of his disciples, the Steve Vais, the Joe Satrianis. His son, Dweezil Zappa, of course, is pretty talented in his own right. And, you know, if you pay any attention out there, you can see some of his spiritual influence in the likes of the Devin Townsends of the world. So you definitely get a vibe of Frank Zappa, a guy who put out so much material. It's really hard for him not to be an influence somewhere. So at least getting his influence, I'm more than aware of. And also, I'm excited of the fact that this album had two musicians whom I absolutely love, Johnny Guitar Watson and the legendary Chester Thompson on the drums. So I was ready to fully jump into this album with the one track I knew.
Mm-hmm. Brett, what were your expectations coming into this album?
Well, I mean, honestly, I the last time I purposely put a Frank Zappa album on to listen to front to back was when I was in junior high. My buddy Will loaned me a CD in exchange for a CD, and at the time, I was looking for copies of like old Bad Religion albums, less than looking for this at that time. So having spent a lot, I listened to enough of it at that time that when I hear Zappa being played, even without him opening his, I can spot it in the wild, and but more so than just the stuff that I heard on Dr. Demento, which I believe Dancin' Fool on Dr. Demento was probably the first time I heard Zappa. But I spent enough time in the last 20 years of my life to around old guitar players and people. I've picked up the reputation of him as a player. Until recently, I hadn't really had a big. I always had this issue with anything that sounded distinctly 70s. the acoustic equivalent of maroon corduroy and brown leather, like the like blue blockers, like if they had a sound, like
Opeth. What
but
happened
like
to Opeth?
I mean, I used to have issues with that, but now, like, the soundtrack to my life is the theme song to Taxi. So I was super excited to get into this because this is 70s as fuck.
Yeah. I have very little to no reference of actual Frank Zappa's music. I think it never came across my world. Honestly, I had heard of Dweezil Zappa before I had heard of Frank Zappa. like
Yeah.
because he was present in the 90s and prominent. He was on MTV and shit. So I didn't have a frame of reference. I knew of him. I should say I didn't know anything. I knew of what he was as a personality, and I think secondhand what his music style was. So I was curious, but I didn't have a actual concrete frame of reference.
You didn't get those Guitar World magazines in 1996 that
as circus
like you're like, who's this guy?
Those mostly had covers with Korn on them, and Deftones back in the day.
It was the 90s.
Yeah, the mid-90s. Yeah, let's talk about this album musically. Matt, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes and elements?
Well, as the name implies, I think this is a pretty easy album as an introduction, as far as getting introduced to Zappa. I asked a friend of mine, like, hey, what should I listen to? Because I had never listened to him either. And he said, okay, get this one and another one. And so the thing that I think of Zappa is just the virtuosic playing across the board. Like, if anything, Zappa is a really good guitar player, but everybody around him is just amazing. Possibly because of this album, I haven't listened to his other albums with this in mind, but I always associate marimbas extremely strongly with Zappa. And complex vocal melodies that kind of like, if somebody put some of these vocal melodies in front of me and said, here, play that on guitar with practice, I'd be like, okay, let's get to practicing. And he's having people sing these. And just I think if there's one thing that most people know about Frank Zappa, it's his lyrics, or the fact that so many of his lyrics are ridiculous and or dirty and or just nonsensical. Yeah. But they kind of are really just an excuse to have a song to play.
Yeah. David, how would you describe this album musically?
I would describe this album musically as rock from the 1970s, led by a guitar player who did not like rock music and did not like rock musicians. So we got a bunch of jazz dudes to play with him. Some really, really talented jazz dudes to play with him. And he takes the rock genre and just kind of does whatever he wants with it. I in a lot of ways, Frank Zappa deconstructed rock music way before just about anybody, save for the likes of Scott Walker. And big respect for that. And it comes through. There are times where it just goes off the rails, but is still very much in control musically, just because of the talent of the players on the album. And it's all led by this really creative dude who just kind of doesn't give a shit. And I think there's something to be respected about that.
Brett, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, I mean, it's definitely 70s rock. Like it's got the things that you would expect, like the super saturated, really dense, crunchy guitar tones. Like the use of bass guitar. It's impressively played, but it also it's moving around. It like there's not a whole lot of difference between the influences on how they songwrite with this album and some of the more proggy rock bands. Like, I mean, there are parts of this that reminded me of like the B-sides of like of Fly By Night that we listened to a long time ago. And like the way that the bass sort of walks, and like it's got all of that. It's also got marimba and vibes and bells, synthesizers.
There's some soul harmonies on this.
There's scat. You know, mark that off your record breakers, the bingo card. You know, we got scat. And scat that's being played along with a guitar playing the same melody. Yeah, it's pretty impressive in that. In that, but like the other thing is, this is probably some of the best mix of an album that I've heard. Like listening to it with as many things that were going on, you could hear everything that was going on. This was like, it was heavily edited, and not in a bad way. Like there's no like open lines that you're hearing like hums. Everything is clean. Stereo effects are used really well. You know, there's you can hear at sometimes the pick hitting the strings at times that are like it sounds almost like metal on metal, like that whizzing on the windings of the strings, and like you can hear that, but like you don't hear the noise that sometimes would come with that as well. So I thought this was really, really well put together, and the guitar tone on this is like, it's ridiculous. It's as dense of a guitar tone as I can think of something that's like, because this is pre-Boston. Like this is like that is a bunch of tubes that are like being pushed real hard in a way that the 70s did really well. Also, the synthesizers were the size of my car, probably. So, you know, that's also pretty cool, because they weren't like, oh, let me plug this weird box in. It was like, let me bring like some like
analog Moog, baby.
Well, yeah, let me bring some Teamsters along with me to like haul this thing out. Like
with 283 different knobs.
Yeah, and you're like patching like your Grand Central Station, like connecting lines. You know, it's great.
Yeah, I think this is the quintessential weird 70s rock record. It's everything you know about 70s rock, but done weird and really well. Like it is, you know, it's definitely like music for musicians. But I think it's a really, I think it's to its credit. It does it really well, and it's fun. It's cool to listen to and to get lost in. Like it does those weird things with like the you know, the what's been said with the synthesizers and like keyboards, and like Captain Beefheart making an appearance on a harmonica.
Yes.
Which is, you know, it's interesting. That's a name I've heard before, courtesy of these two guys on the bottom of the video feed. I imagine. And yeah, it is such a nice weird mix of sounds and approaches to music and ideas, and the voices are fun. The lyrics are, you know, dumb, but that's fine. You know, it was an excuse to make music.
They're a smart kind of dumb.
Yeah,
hey, we've listened to a lot of dumb lyrics on this podcast over the years. This one was just putting it out in an earnest way.
Whoa.
Yeah, and like, and you kind of see in the like the lyrical content, a lot of what it was fun like looking through Frank Zappa's like info on like on the internet on his Wikipedia mostly, how basically he got mixed reviews from critics back in the day, because mostly just saying like, oh, he's talented enough, but has no emotional depth. It's like, and like I love the Village Voice. Robert Kreisco said that
Yeah, I read that.
that review is great in his Wikipedia article. I love like the ending is like, what's changed is the taste of his erstwhile lionizers. They've gotten bored with his repertoire of stylistic barbarities. Us smart people just got bored faster. It's like I love that idea. Which is I think probably to why a lot like why many probably enjoy it in retrospect or from researching back as younger people back to this music because you weren't there and you weren't inundated with it or gotten bored of it and you just kind of like enjoy it for what it is because you can definitely see where the criticism comes from, but you can also definitely just enjoy the ride because it's a fun ride to be on, even without hallucinogenics, things like that.
Who can say? Who can
Zappa
say?
did not do.
Yeah,
Which he did not do.
Zappa was, he's like me. He didn't need to do drugs because he was he was born
Drugs
high.
do him.
He was, yeah.
His brain was already drugs. Like it's like me. Like if I did drugs, I don't know, it might zero things out and make me normal. So that's why I avoid them really. Who wants that?
I just like to sleep a few hours a night. That's all.
Exactly.
Hey,
Judge me.
Benadryl, some hardcore shit. Like,
exactly.
Speak with a medical professional before.
Yeah. Acetaminophen's a hell of a drug.
That's right.
Matt, what would be some of the key tracks? Let's drill down. What would be some of the key tracks for you?
Inca Road's the opening track. It is 8 minutes and 45 seconds long. It is not a I wouldn't call it an overture per se, although it does have it pinches elements from some of the following songs, but it goes through just about every style you might want. And again, this is like just the marimba on this. I saw there's a video on YouTube of them doing this live, and even watching it, it's just hard to comprehend that it's playable. Like somehow it's easier to comprehend when you're listening to it, but then you see people doing that, and you're like, no, that's not real. And the lyrics, it's this song is to me very emblematic of Zappa. Like the lyrics, there is a subject but they're pretty nonsensical. It's about did a vehicle come from somewhere out there just to land in the Andes, and then it talks about a guacamole queen. Pojama People is a great jam. It's one of pretty much anybody could jam over this. It's just a 2-chord, but because it's the Frank Zappa's band, I guess they were still the mothers of invention at this time. They do it really well, and I still find myself saying Mother Mary and Joseph to as an exclamation.
Yes. It's a good exclamation. Mother Mary and Joseph.
Florentine Pogan, I really like. I think it's a cookie. There's no position. But this is another great somewhat quintessential Zappa song, and then there's a simple riff that's repeated over and over, but in between each line there's just this noise art. There's probably a better term for it, but just these little interstitials with just interesting little sounds. It's always fun to listen to and kind of delve deeper into. Mm-hmm. And San Bernardino, just because that song's a banger. And, Bobby, I'm sorry you got a head like a potato. I really am.
Yes.
There he is. Head like a potato right there. David, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Florentine Poggen has the shout out to Chester Thompson and Chester's Gorilla, which eventually becomes a Genesis reference. So, of course, I had to make note of that one. Sofa number 2. The verses on this are basically a 70s soul song that just so happens to be in German because, of course, Frank Zappa would do that. Of course he would. And lastly, Andy. A lot of this album has moments and pockets in the songs that are really enjoyable and you really want to get lost in for a couple of bars. But Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention seem to intentionally move on from things very quickly because fuck you, it's Frank Zappa. And they do that. Not so much with Andy. The instrumental section leading into the latter half of the song as it goes out, you can really kind of enjoy and get lost in. So Andy as well.
Mm-hmm. Really, in retrospect, the one drug that probably Frank Zappa would have benefited from was probably Ritalin. Brett, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Well, among other things that have already been said about Inca Roads, I was just, it's impressive to write a song that uses 35 time signatures. It's another to have a drummer that can do it like that. This was tight.
Chester Thompson, fucking legend.
I mean, having everybody to be able to hit everything on time is impressive. If you've tried to record two people that know what they're doing together, trying to get everything at this level is super impressive. Pojama people, it's absurd. It's absurd to have a song like that with that much scat that also has some of the coolest wah pedal boodle deedle doodling that you see on this album, because there's quite a bit of it. This is that in prime display, pre Eddie Van Halen boodle deedles is always fun. And Andy, I have a, instead of just talking about ARF and other things, I just want to talk about Andy. I had a good time with Andy. Actually, lyrically, it kind of isn't as bad. It's not as cringy as some stuff we just heard from Hammer. So I enjoyed San Bernardino quite a bit. The lyrical journey that I went on, making me think of what Frank Zappa's opinion on the outskirts of the county
yes.
in the 70s is kind of an adventure. But yeah, there's a bunch of this is an album that has some songs on it.
Yes.
It's an album with some songs on it.
We just listened to Hammer. That had half a song on it.
That had six. That had 8 halves of a song. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it hurt me.
And still went on too long.
Exactly.
Oh God.
It just repeated them. Yeah, I think as far as tracks, I mean, almost everybody touched on Inca People. I think it's just a really nice opener, really nice, just throw you into the deep end kind of a thing. It just does a lot of really cool things well, especially with the many different time signature changes. And things with the keyboards and the piano and the guitar, and just a lot of really fun things. And yes, Pajama People. I'm here to stand up for the Pajama People. Pajama People matter. They're just living their lives with their pajamas.
PD, I believe they like to be called evening wear Americans now.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
I stand with them and I support them. I am your ally. Yeah.
Shouldn't you be lounging with them?
Yeah. I don't. I'm an ally. I'm not I'm not part of them. I'm not one of their people. I'm just simply simply supporting them. I
understand.
You sign up to their newsletter.
Exactly. I've got a
Evening
pajama
Wear
person friend.
Americans.
I have a pajama person
Evening
friend.
Wear Americans, Petey.
I'm concerned about the pajama people vote.
Yeah.
I'd rather them vote for things that I agree with. So
That
I will
is a
support what they
slave term, fellas.
Yes.
It's 2020.
Evening Wear Americans.
Yes.
That's right.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
mean, this is the 70s. Certain terms were considered acceptable back then, or at least more
It's a
tolerated.
different time.
It was a different time.
Exactly. Let's bring it back around the horn. Talk about some conclusive thoughts. David, how would you conclude on this album?
Personally, I am a little bit conflicted. I wear my love of progressive rock proudly on my sleeve. And given that there's so much of this that is thumbing its nose at 70s progressive rock, I feel a little guilty about how much I liked it. Yes, it has the drummer that Phil Collins decided is good enough to play in Genesis for him when he was singing. That's a big check plus. But damn it, the music is good. The songs are enjoyable. No matter how hard Frank Zappa tries to make them not enjoyable, they are enjoyable. At his core, he was a good songwriter. And when the time called for it, he let his bandmates do their thing. And that's really cool. And on top of all of that, he splorts his Zappa essence all over it. There are instruments that don't belong, but it works, and that's exactly why he put them there, because fuck you, it's Frank Zappa, he can do that. There are vocal ideas that even Peter Gabriel at this point in history wasn't doing. There were synth sounds and ambient noises that even the likes of Keith Emerson hadn't thought of yet during this time, and he does it because he can do it, and nobody's really going to stop him.
Mm-hmm.
Very Rick Sanchez-esque, Frank Zappa, in a lot of ways. But somehow it comes together and it works, and it's a damn well put together album. Despite me calling Frank Zappa the Rick Sanchez of rock, kind of with a similar fan base. Oops, did I say that?
That's over the line.
Yeah.
That was rude.
I mean,
laugh.
Rick, I mean, he had a good time. You know, Rick Sanchez is not a bad person. You know, he had that stint on CNN, but you know, it worked out. But you know, he got fired, but he was all
The
right.
cartoon, Petey. The cartoon.
I'm buying it, Petey. It's like
I can't help
Sold.
it. Every time I hear Rick Sanchez, I'm like, the guy that was on WSEN.
Yeah, your cousin. He's like your cousin or something, right, Petey?
God, I grew up watching Rick Sanchez. Well, not watching him, but he was always on TV. You know, it was weird hearing his name and it not being that fat face. Brett, how would you conclude on this album?
I don't know. I dug it. You know, it was all right. This was easy because there's plenty of things to talk about. That you know, there are things that meet expectations, and there's some things that I didn't expect. But you know, as somebody who spent enough time like hearing people talk about Zappa and reading articles and seeing sheet music for Zappa and being like, well, whatever, I don't want that. Give me more of these Korn songs. I was never that. The Guitar World magazine made me hate 7-string guitars. But it's like, how do I play that? No. Yeah, this is a decent thing to listen to if you've never heard, just so you like have the vocabulary to talk to people about this kind of music. Yeah, it's mid 70s and kind of cheesy and like in like some ways, but like it works. It doesn't seem as dated as some things could be, and the quality holds up. Like it's well put together. Like if it sounded like it was recorded in somebody's basement, like it would be a completely different album.
Yeah. This is definitely an album worth checking out, if nothing else, to at least understand what your music nerd friends are talking about. Like, if they're going on about Frank Zappa.
To have an educated opinion to tell somebody that they're wrong.
Exactly. It is odd and it's weird, but it's fun. And this is approachable even in its weirdness. But yeah, it is a musician's musician, thing. But I think that is fine and that is good, and it's to its strength because it is still a fun record. But yeah, Matt, how would you conclude on this album?
I think a lot of people, which I'm surprised I didn't hear any of y'all mention either of these two songs. I think the two songs that I first associated with Zappa were Don't Eat the Yellow Snow and Valley Girl. And there's so much more to Frank Zappa than those two songs. I mean, I'm not saying those are not a large part of his musical stylings, but there is a lot more, and there's a lot more interesting stuff. And if you can listen past the, to me, extremely entertaining lyrics, you will find a lot of just great musicianship. Fantastic players. And, I think this is a great album to kind of dip your feet into and just, okay, I think I like some of this. And from there, you can kind of branch out and explore some different avenues of Frank Zappa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so go check it out. Those are our thoughts on One Size Fits All. Now we get to the main event of the evening. Our haiku reviews, where we sum it all up in
Oh
form.
boy. Well, I guess I'm gonna have to freestyle this one.
Hey, you will not be the first person.
Just off the dome, spit them bars.
That's right.
Spit them bars off.
Real
the dome.
MCs only. Real MCs only. Let's go.
Yeah, let's get it. Brett, what is your haiku?
All right, palms are sweaty. PD Spaghetti. Impressively played, of its time in a good way. I had a good time.
I make pretty good spaghetti. I do I do either BA's best spaghetti meatballs, or there's Claire Saffit's recipe for spaghetti de pomodoro, which I just did. Pretty choice. The key is the tomatoes.
See the stuff you make, and God, it always looks so good.
Yeah, I'm just enjoying it.
It just makes me wish I was.
Why don't you do a cooking channel, Petey?
I don't know. I might.
You have access to seafood. I don't.
I haven't done much seafood. But yeah. I'm gonna do my haiku. Godfather of Weird might not be for everyone, but I enjoyed it. David, are you ready? What is your haiku?
Music snobs be damned. It's almost accessible. Weird and kinda great.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And last but not least, Matt, what is your haiku?
A gentle intro with plenty of depth to delve. Go forth and listen.
Those are
highly recommended for Devin Townsend fans.
Exactly.
Or people that are into the theme song to Taxi.
Exactly. Those are our thoughts on Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. One size fits all. I'm not going to write Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention in the video intro thing.
Oh, the SEO.
In the title, but not in the screen that happens in the entrance theme of the show, because that's just
it'll just
so if you saw that and you saw he only said Frank Zappa when he wrote it down on the intro card. I'm like, dude,
oh come on, I said Chester Thompson's name like 18 times. Don't at me.
Exactly. But those are our thoughts on Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. One size fits all. You can find it on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. Following along at home. On that Spotify playlist will be next week's record, which, barring other things like special episodes, is going to be me. My album. I've been doing a lot of like Asian stuff and been on a streak on that stuff and new stuff and Asian stuff and weird stuff like that. I want to go back to like just the regular stuff I used to listen to, which is I'm going to do a really cool record. I'm going to bring in some Incubus, which is going to be fun. I'm going to bring in Incubus's A Crow Left of the Murder, which is a late Incubus as far as my brain is concerned, even though it happened even though it was released a while ago. So look forward to that. But that'll be next week, and this is this week. And you can, of course, find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM. Matt is at MRiddickW. Brett is at HibbittyBirbird, HIBBITYBIBBARD. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com if you want to email us. Rebelli.net for this and other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube. Comment there. Leave us feedback. I'll try to be more diligent, especially now that I'm always home. So I'm always sitting there. I can read the comment and reply. So if you leave feedback, I'll see it. But yeah, do all the things like, share, subscribe. You can find us all wherever you find podcasts: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.
Yes, I compared Zappa fans to Rick and Morty fans. Yes, I did.
I don't know. The Rick and Morty fans won't make it to the end of the album. A review, sorry.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.